In this video, you'll learn everything you need to know about using Drummer in Logic Pro X to create your own drum beats. Now, this is a pretty long tutorial, so don't feel like you need to watch it all now. I've also included some timestamps in the description so you can come back and reference different parts of it later. And before we dive in, I just want to share with you our free Logic Pro X cheat sheet. It's completely free, and inside you have my favorite keyboard shortcuts so you can save time while you're working. Also some information and tips for the different stock plugins that come with Logic, as well as some recommended starter settings. So it's just a really useful PDF to have if you're a Logic Pro X user. So either head to the link on screen now or the link in the bio to get access. Okay, let's do this. So what we're going to do now is add a drummer track. So let's click the add button and simply go to drummer, and then let's delete this audio track. So this is a drummer track. And this is essentially a virtual drummer who plays for you, and you don't really have to program it in yourself. Really easy to use, really good sounding kits, really great for composing music. And also drums are the hardest thing to record at home or in a low budget studio. So if you're producing music at home, I recommend you use some kind of virtual drums and then use perhaps even an amp simulator, DI your bass, so that pretty much everything is virtual or DI'd, and then the only thing you record acoustically are vocals or other instruments that need to be acoustic. You can record drums at home, but quite often it's hard to get high quality. It can add more character, and obviously if you're playing live or you have a band set up, that might be more desirable. But if you're producing your own music, I recommend you use something like Drummer, and this is really great. There's other options, of course, like Easy Drums, for example, is another option. But I really like Logic's built-in drummer. And it's great even if you're just writing music on the fly as well and you want to listen to how it will sound with a full band. So all we did was add a drummer track, and it's already done all this for us. So you can see here it's added 2 regions. Let's click off them and press Z to just let them fill the screen. And when we click on a region, the corresponding drummer track comes up here. So you can see these are slightly different. And this bar at the top indicates this play bar. So as I move this, you'll notice that moves, but it only shows the region that you have selected. So when we select this region, it's now showing bars 9 to 17. So first of all, let's have a listen. Let's just stick with this guy for now. Let's go to the beginning and let's loop this. So if we just hit tab to change our key focus, you now see the blue square around this screen, and then let's press U to loop that and press play. So pretty standard stuff. Now let's try this one. So that one's a bit faster, a bit more energetic, and then we can change the tempo, and of course the drums will mold with it. Or we could go slower. And we can also change the time signature. So as you can see, it follows along with your guide track. So how do we edit these? Well, if we turn cycle off, we can use the presets for now. We're going to explore all of this in a later lesson, but all we do is just choose a different preset, and you'll see that when we do that, this all changes. So let's zoom into one of these. If we hold Control and Alt, and that allows us to zoom anywhere, and zoom into just the first bar. Let's also loop the first bar. So let's go to the scissor tool, just cut there. Back to the pointer, select this and press U. Now each of these triangles represents a different drum hit. So what you can see here is the kick and the snare, and then these are different cymbals or different velocities. Let's have a listen and watch how these represent the different drum hits. Let's try something a bit simpler. half pipe. Mixtape. So you can see here is the kick and the snare. The different triangles show different velocities, so this one's much smaller because that's just kind of like a ghost note on the snare, whereas this one is much harder. And then here is cymbals and toms, and you can see this tom roll at the end. So that's how the drums are represented, and you can't edit this at the moment. We're going to look at turning this into MIDI data in a later lesson. But for now, let's click off of everything and press Z to see the whole section. And let's also undo that cut. There we go. So there's lots of different drummers. There's not just one drummer. So let's turn off cycle and choose a different drummer. So these are the different genres that you can choose. So let's try R&B. Now when you select a new drummer, it will give you this prompt. Change the drummer, replace changes you've made to the region settings on this track. To keep these changes, press keep settings when changing drummers in the presets pop-up menu in the drummer editor. So for now, we're just going to say change drummer. And this is why it prompted us, because this is all now changed. So let's have a listen to this guy now. And let's make the BPM something a bit more regular. So you can hear completely different drum kit, completely different playing style, and there's lots and lots of different options. This guy is a bit heavier rock. So you can hear, again, different drum kit. It tells you here what drum kit they're using. So this guy's using heavy. Now you can use different drum kits with different drummers. So say, for example, you like this beat, but you want it to sound a bit tighter, like this guy's drum kit. Well, what you can do is if we go back to this guy, it'll change to his kit, SoCal. And then if we go here and hold Option, and then click on Anders, it will change to his style, heavy hand, but you can see his kit is still SoCal. So let's have a listen. And of course you can do that with anything. It might sound weird if you do it across genres. But that way you can combine different drumming styles with different drum kits to create new sounds. Now here you might have noticed that some of these are yellow and some of them are greyed out. And on any beat, the yellow highlighted drums represent which parts of the kit are being used. So in this Center City loop, we've got the cymbals. Whereas in this Play the Game loop, it's mostly just the hi-hat, the snare and the kick. Now there was a cymbal at the beginning, but these represent the main kind of bulk of the drum sound for this loop. Now, one more thing to note is that here in this, we can just use this like the play bar here, and we can double click. And we can also use the play button. As you can see, that will actually loop that drum kit. So we can press play here. And it loops that section. Another handy option is this one here. And when we click this, the loop section that's shown here will follow the playback cursor when we press play. So you can see here, as I scroll between them, it's now following the loop along. Whereas where I turn this off, it does it purely based on your selection. So when it's off, you need to select the section to edit it. When it's on, it will go by your playback cursor. And as we play, You can see it follows the playback cursor. Now let's look at how you can edit the drummer loops and the sound and the aggressiveness and how these loops are played. So here we've got this really handy XY pad, and as we move that around you can see this region is changing. Now you can only edit a region that you've got selected, so as you can see it's only editing this region. I can select both and it will do the same for both, but let's say for example we want this one to be really loud and complex, and then halfway through if we cut it we want it to go to soft and complex. Let's have a listen to that change. And we could even go to the opposite scale just to make it really exaggerated. So we're going from loud and complex to soft and simple. So you can hear the change there, and that's really, really easy way to make the drummer match the feel of the song and the dynamics of the song that you're composing, because you can just move this around. It's so simple. And you can hear there, even though we're using the same loop, rim shot, it sounds completely different when we go from loud and complex to even loud and simple. So that's one easy way to alter the dynamics and the feel of it. You've then got lots of other options here. So we can change the hi-hat rhythm. Let's loop this by hitting this button. And you should be able to hear the hi-hat rhythm is changing. We can also do the same for kick and snare. Here we've got half time and twice time options. So that will again make a very different vibe. Let's listen to them. So that goes from doing the beat on 1 and 3 to here doing just the first beat of the bar, and here doing twice as many as that. Now we've also got this fills option. So as I increase this, it will add more fills at the end of kind of 8 bar and 16 bar and 4 bar phrases. So when it's off, you can see it's just a straight drum beat with just a cymbal hit. Or not a cymbal hit, but rather an open hi-hat. Whereas I increase the fills, and now suddenly we've got this fill halfway. And a fill is simply something that's different to the normal kit. It's kind of like improvising different hits, and of course we can adjust the swing as well. And if you're happy with your settings, you can lock these in with that little lock key to make sure you don't accidentally adjust them. Now here we can also adjust the push and the pull, and this means when it's pushing it's very slightly ahead of the beat, and this is better for music that's really upbeat, or if it's a crescendo and it's building to something and you want it to feel energetic and push the song forward. Or pull is when you want it to be behind the beat, and that's where you have that kind of lazy, groovy feel, a bit more relaxed. Let's listen to the difference. Before we do though, let's get a bass line in here just for a point of reference for something that's on the beat. That'll do for now, and let's just hit L to loop that, and then let's press U and loop this section, and now let's play with the feel. So you can see on push it feels like it's pushing the music forward, it sounds more upbeat, whereas pull sounds more relaxed and kind of groovy. and then straight up the middle we've just got on the beat. Ghost notes, that adjusts the volume of the ghost notes, which are kind of those in between hits that aren't as important. So let's find a groove with lots of ghost notes. So see these here, if we hold Control, Alt and zoom, these notes here in between. You can hear the really subtle snare notes. Where it's just lightly tapping it. Or if I increase the volume of those, now it's got kind of more of a marching band feel, whereas when they're quiet, it's a bit more groovy, a bit more subtle. Hi-hat is normally set to automatic, which means it will open normally on the first beat of the bar and stuff like that, but we can change that to open or closed. So when it's closed, and when it's open. And it's best to use closed for verses or quieter sections of the song. And then a really good way to just build up the tension before a chorus is to just make the hi-hats open for a bar or two, like this. So that's a handy parameter to have. And of course you could just, to make that permanent, you could just use the scissors, cut this here, and make the hi-hat open on this and close on this. And there we go. So these are the more advanced details. Another really handy feature is the follow for the kick and snare. If we turn that on, it will give us a drop-down boxes of all of our channels. And this will actually detect the beats and the groove. So you can see now the kick lines up with the hits on the bass. And this is a really great way to very quickly and easily make sure the drums are kind of in sync and grooving with your bass line or with the other parts of your music. Let's listen. So you can hear the difference there, because this is still its own kick, whereas this one is in sync. Listen to that again. This one sounds more kind of natural, more like how a real band would play, whereas this one still sounds good, but it sounds like they're kind of two different sources that have been put together. So there we go. That's another really handy feature. If you find a sound that you really like, you can use the presets as well. So I could just save this as, actually let's save this one instead. Delete that one. Save preset. Turn this back on follow. Grooving with bass. And then we can recall that preset at any time. If you ever lose this window, you use the same editor as the audio file editor, except you do it when you have the drummer selected. And here we can see like so. So you can either double click or press E or use this button here. Now let's actually create a full song using drummer. So let's start an empty project, drummer, and we're going to stick to the rock genre. Let's try mixtape for the intro. Let's listen to that. So let's shorten this down, and maybe in this last section we'll just add a fill that can go into the song. So we'll just have a drum intro. So let's now turn up the fill on that, make it a bit louder, make this a bit quieter. Cool. Now let's get a verse. Let's try something a bit simpler and a bit softer. Instead, let's make it go straight into the chorus. So that can be our chorus, and then we just need to add a new drum region. So we right click, create drummer region, and by default that'll create another 8-bar loop. So now let's do something simpler. Let's go soft and simple. And we'll pull it a bit just so that it makes the verse feel a bit more relaxed. So there we go. We've got kind of an intro here. We've got a chorus and a verse. So now let's just drop in some loops quickly, just to get some bass and some other stuff there. I like that. So let's change it to that key, which is C sharp. And we can slow it down a bit so it's a bit more like that bass line. So now we just need some kind of, let's just go with a piano for now. That'll do, and then let's just grab a bass line for the verse. And another electric piano line. Cool. So now we've got kind of our three sections. We've got an intro, we've got a verse and a chorus. So now we're going to use the arrangement ruler to finish the arrangement of our song, and then we can do some really cool things like move the arrangement round without having to edit all the audio and quickly populate the drummer track. So let's just press this button here, or you can press G as a shortcut, and this opens the guides. Now we're only going to use the arrangement window here, so we want to turn these off. So let's control click and configure global tracks, or you can just go Alt G, and let's disable all and then just turn on arrangement. Cool. So now what we're going to do is go back to the beginning by pressing enter, and we're going to add an intro, and let's just drag that to the same length. Then we're going to add again, and this time it will automatically change it to a verse, but we've actually got our chorus there. And let's press add again, and then we've got a verse. So now our different sections are clearly labeled, which is handy in its own right, because now we know where we are in the song. We know if it's the intro, the chorus, the verse. But the other benefit of this is that this automatically highlights everything below it when we select it. So if we hold Option and drag this, it will copy it. And what we could even do is, if we wanted to, we could move it, so we could swap it with the verse. And now it'll move the audio underneath. So let's move that back. And then now let's copy the verse. And then we might want another chorus, or perhaps a bridge. So let's add in a bridge that we can populate. Then another chorus. Let's make the bridge shorter. So now what we can do is, if we wanted to, and we decided, you know what, I don't want this last verse, we could either get rid of it completely by pressing delete once to delete the audio, and delete again to remove it completely. Let's undo that. Or we could decide, actually, I want the bridge to be after the chorus, and we simply move it. And this makes it really easy when you're composing to play around with the song structure. So let's populate the bridge with something a bit different, because the bridge is normally the section that kind of is a break from the typical verse and chorus structure. So first of all, let's just check we've got kind of the right length going on here. Length 4 bars, which will tell you just there in this box. So that's good. And let's use the same drummer, of course, but let's try something different. Let's go half time, and let's go on the toms, and you can just get to stuff quickly by just clicking it here. And let's have a shaker. And finally, let's pull the beat back a bit more. Let's have a listen to that. let's make this a bit longer. And then here, halfway through, let's make it go more aggressive. So another shortcut you can use instead of using the scissor tool to cut is if you hold Command to open your marquee tool, you can just double click and that will cut. And then we can make this a bit louder and make the hi-hat a bit more open. Listen to that. So that change is a bit too drastic, so let's change it back to toms and just make it a bit more aggressive. So it fills up as well. And then let's just grab a couple of instruments. Let's make it kind of just a chilled out. Let's have a listen to that. So you can hear that the electric piano there is actually kind of going just before the beat. So it's trying to like push it a bit. So let's turn on follow and get it to follow this. And let's actually change it to push. Let's see if that sounds better. So then we could just check and we could add a quick outro just to finish off the song. Let's see if we can just do a single hit. So if we zoom in and just drag these out for one. See how that sounds. You can hear the drummer will still let it ring out. So let's listen to that. And let's cut this and add a fade here. Fade tool like so. There we go. So that is our song finished. Now that you've finished the structure of your song, you can go in and edit the sound of the drums even more to your liking. Because so far we've just changed the feel of the actual rhythm and the playing using these options. But we can change the sound of the drum kit as well. So if we click this little icon here, we can then click on a drum and we can change to a different drum. The snare, we can change to different snares. And you can also adjust these options as well. So tune, dampen, and gain. So let's start with the kick. So as we adjust the tune, that's just pitch shifting it. And I advise you don't do it too much because when you go too low, or too high, it can start to sound unnatural. But here you can make it sound a bit bigger. And we can also add dampening, and this will just cut the note short a bit more. So there you can hear the sustain, and about halfway, we've got a bit more dampening. And you can also adjust the gain. So if you think that any one particular part of the kit is consistently too loud, like cymbals for example, you can turn them down even more. And here you can adjust the individual crashes. And you can adjust the individual toms. So we can either tune them all to be higher, or we can tune them all to be lower, or we can tune them individually. When you're selecting your different drum parts, you can hit the I information button here for a bit more info about the size, the material, the finish, and more information about the drum itself, and a bit of a summary here of the sound. You can also use the advanced smart controls. So if you click on a region and I click smart controls, that's going to bring up this box here. So I can straight away play with the mix, and this is much easier than adjusting the gain because it's all here right in front of me, and I can turn things on and off. Let's have a listen. I can turn compression on or off. And you'll see what this has actually done is added a compressor to the plugin chain. And we're going to talk about compression in more depth later on. But if you just want to really quickly add some compression to your drums to make them sound a bit more consistent, maybe a bit more aggressive, you can just dial it in a bit there. Tone you can also adjust. And again, this is adding an EQ, so as I adjust this, it's changing this EQ curve to add more bass, reduce some of the low mids, and kind of upper mids are being boosted a tiny bit, as is the very top end. Be careful with this because that's quite an aggressive frequency curve, so try and just use that subtly if it does help. And then finally room, we can add, and you'll see that this corresponds to this bus here. Now if I go to the mixer, you'll now see that we've got an EQ called Small Room Drum Booth 4, which means that on this reverb, which again we're going to talk about later, you can see Drum Booth 4. So what this is doing is actually it's automatically created a reverb bus for us that we can send more reverb. So let's have a listen. So that's with everything bypassed. And then if I turn compression on and compressor on and the reverb on, and what you'll notice is it's done it for the whole track. This isn't specific to the region, because what it's actually doing is applying effects to the channel itself. So all of these drum tracks are going through that. So now this will sound different as well. And there we go. That's a few more ways you can kind of tailor the drums to your sound. You can also go into even more depth with the drum sound by changing to a producer kit. So if we highlight our drum track and go to the library, we can see here that we're currently using the SoCal kit. If we go to producer kits and then SoCal Plus, it will change slightly. And if we close the library, close this, you can see now we've got a little drop down box, and we can actually mix these individually. So if we just solo the snare, for example, hi-hat even. So we've now got the hi-hat on its own channel. So we can apply levels, processing. We could apply just an EQ just to the hi-hat, for example. And this is really handy if you want to have more control over the mix of the drums, because you can process each kit individually, and when you're done you can just hit that arrow and it will compile them back. But this also means we can change the kit a bit more. So with the producer kit we have a few more options in terms of the actual drum. And again, dense focused, tight focused, deep clean, dense focus, and you can also download additional content here. And then we've also got a leak, and that dictates whether the kick drum leaks to the leak channel. And this is as if the kick drum was leaking into the snare mic, for example, if you were multi-micing a drum kit. Overheads, again, that just dictates whether the kick is in the overheads or in the room. So you have a few more options there with the producer kit, and that's really good when you're getting towards the end of your mix and you want to have a bit more control over each of these individual drums, over the levels, the EQ, the compression, absolutely everything. And of course, you even got the room tracks here, the leak track. So anything that's got leak turned on will leak into that. We've got 2 room mics. And you can see you've got a room A and a room B. So what I can do is I can change it so that room B is the kick and everything else is room A. So I can even have 2 different rooms. So now you'll hear room A. It's just the snare, whereas because we changed the kick to room B, so you have quite a lot of control there. That's really handy. We even got this punch channel. So that's kind of like a kick beater. Experiment with that. That can be really useful. When you're working with electronic music or R&B and hip hop, styles of music that you would traditionally use some kind of drum sampler for, you can get even more options in Drummer. First of all, let's open an arrangement and just get rid of these. And just to show you this handy feature, let's just add in a few verses and a chorus. When we add a drummer track now, if we zoom to the whole thing, so we add a new track, drummer, you'll see it automatically does it for the 3 sections, and it will kind of take into account each alignment thing so that it gives it a name. So that can be handy if you know the song structure. Add that first before you add the drummer track, and then it does it all automatically for you. So now let's delete this audio track and let's change to an electronic style, like electronic. And what you'll notice now is this is different. So we now have a different view. So again, we have the same presets, but we've got slightly different options here because we're not working with an acoustic kit anymore. We're working with electronic instruments. So we still have the follow option, we still have the different presets, and we can turn stuff on and on, but we have slightly different percussion elements. Let's have a listen to that. So you can play around with that. It's slightly different. And on the detail screen as well, we've got some very different options. Again, you can turn stuff on and off. The complexity affects it's the same as here, simple, complex, but you can adjust between individual instruments. And of course, you've got a range as well. So you can make it always complex or always simple, or you can make it a variation from simple to complex. So let's just listen to that as an example. So now you'll see it's a pretty complex rhythm. But when I bring this up all the way, it becomes even more complex because now it's only doing very complex. Whereas if I bring this to simple, you see now it's literally just doing 2. So you can either have it doing always complex, always simple, or a variation of simple and complex. So here it alternates between simple and then complex. Phrase variation, that's how repetitive. So if you want it to be completely repetitive, turn that to 0. Whereas if I bring it up, this is going to be and let's just use a normal full kit to show that. Whereas if I turn it to simple, so you can see this is now much more repetitive. This rhythm here is the same as here, and it's just repeating that rhythm. Humanize will throw them slightly off the grid. So you can see here, stuff's just moving a tiny bit. When it's all the way to 0, everything's going to be perfectly quantized to the grid. And we're going to talk about quantization in a lot more depth later on. But if we bring that to full, it will now sound more human, more like it was played by a human that's very slightly out of time. So you can see when it's up all the way, some of it's kind of out of time. So let's try about halfway. So experiment with that. Again, you have the fills and the swing, and that's the same as with the other acoustic kits. And then also we have auto halftime, and that's because with some genres of music, if the tempo is 140, for example, in dubstep, that would be actually more like 70, as an example. So even though the BPM is 140, you want the drums to sound like they're playing at 70, because when it's at 140 like this, it's pretty fast. Whereas most genres, when it's above 110, it goes to halftime. Like so. So that's handy, unless of course you're doing drum and bass, something like that, where you want it to be really fast. Then you'd probably want to turn the complexity down. You can experiment with that. Now, the next step, if you wanted even more control, is to convert this to MIDI. And then we can control it completely. We can edit the beats and the sounds and everything. So we right-click, convert, and then convert to MIDI region. So now we can see the MIDI itself. I'm going to talk about MIDI in a lot more depth later, but we can edit it here. So let's have a listen. Let's say I wanted to get rid of this kick and that snare. So now when we listen, I can do the same here. And then I can use the pencil tool or just hold command, because that's by default the secondary tool. So I can then draw in. And you can start really editing it. Like I said, we're going to cover MIDI in a lot more depth later on. What you can also do now is play with the different samples. So if we go to drum machine, you can see all of the different samples that are being used. So once you're in this screen, you can adjust a lot of parameters. Again, I can adjust the pitch. And sometimes you might want to tune that to the key of the song. That can sometimes work really well. I can adjust the bend. And that dictates the pitch bend from the attack to the kind of the release of the note. So with 0, it's just straight. But I can add a bit of an attack. Decay dictates how long the note is. Wave shape goes from sine to square. So that goes from kind of clean to more aggressive. Saturation is kind of like distortion. Asymmetry. Again, this kind of gives us just like a slightly different wave shape and affects the sound of it in that way. Pan, left or right, and finally volume. Now we can also control the sends. So if we click on the top here where it says seismic, we can then go to sends, and we can change the amount of reverb. And we can add a delay as well. And that's the delay that's been timed to the song. And these are all within the channel itself. So we can add more reverb here if we want to. It's kind of added this reverb here for us to use, but this reverb is different. This is within the Drum Machine Designer. We can also just mix instruments here when, again, you're selected on the seismic bar at the top. And we've also got some cool effects here. So you can see now the kit delay and the kit reverb are actually these delays and plugins that have been added. So you can see as I turn this delay up, we can see it there on the plugin, and the same with the reverb. And finally drive. So all of these kit effects correspond to a plugin. So again, overdrive you can see here. As I touch the high filter, it's adding it on the EQ. Low filter as well. So that just makes it easier to use this interface to control those effects. If you want to try a different kit altogether, you can open up the library, and here you have the different kits. I don't have any of them downloaded, but you can download them and experiment with all the different kits as well. So now we're using a slightly different sampler. And this is Ultra Beat. We're going to cover this in more detail in another section. But again, you just have similar controls. You can control the volume, and these are all synthesized, so we can adjust. Say, for example, we want the sub, which isn't being used. What about the kick? This kick here. So then we've got all of these controls, which we're going to cover later. This can be a bit more intimidating. So we'll cover that in more detail later. If you're using drummer regions, you can always convert this back, and you can still either get to your drum sampler here, or you can get to it here from the same way that we get to the acoustic kits when we're using the rock drummer, for example. And again, you can also get to the drum kit by just clicking there when you're using a rock kit, and it will bring you to this drum kit plugin. So that's it for drummer. It's really versatile, really useful when you're composing music, knocking up demos, or even for kind of like producing music at home if you're doing rock and stuff like that. But if you're doing electronic music, you can use it for absolutely everything. Really fast, really easy to use.